right, so here we have on page 10, let's actually start with number 70 because I want you to see how everything kind of works together. So let's go ahead and factor this x squared minus 15x plus 54. All right. So we're going to make a parentheses. And since this coefficient is 1, it's really not necessary to use the x method, because now you can just say, okay, well, what times what gives you 54 that will add up to negative 15? So what would that be? 6 and 9? How about 6 and 9? 6 and 9, and both would have to be negative because it has to add to a negative 15. Okay, so then here, since this is a negative on the outside, let's just factor this out. Let's just divide everything by a negative. Okay, usually we kind of pull those out on the outside, this negative here. So pull it out on the outside, which means you're just dividing everything by a negative. Okay, and now let's factor the bottom. Okay, so I know I have x and x, and I'm going to leave this negative out here somewhere. Okay, and let's put it in a different color. All right, so there's a negative that I took out. So let's see, what times what will give you 42 that equals to negative 13? 6 and 7, okay, and both would have to be negative. Okay, and then once you get it all factored like that, you just simply cross out like factors. So you see there's an x minus 6 at the top and an x minus 6 at the bottom. So that's like one whole. So you just cross them out. And really whatever's left is the answer. Okay, that's all to it. So I'm going to leave that negative that was on the outside. I'm going to write down my numerator, write down my denominator, and you're finished. Okay, so that's why I said, this is not a very hard lesson if you already know how to factor. Okay, let's look at 72. Okay, these are easy to factor because the a term is 1, so I just look at these two terms here. What times what gives you 15? That will equal to 8. 3 and 5. Okay, let's look at the bottom. A term is 1, so I just need to look at the b and c terms. What times what will give you negative 45? That means one binomial will be a positive, one be a negative, but will also equal to a negative 4. Okay, negative 9 and what? Positive 5. Okay, so there's our pairs that are alike. Okay, cross those out, and you're left with x plus 3 divided by x minus 9. And really, after you do that, you can really drop the parentheses. You don't necessarily, you can keep them or you can drop them. Okay, it doesn't matter. So let's go to like one up here, like 69, where you don't have a binomial and a binomial. So the top cannot be factored anymore. So let's just write that down. The bottom, I can factor out a GCF. So what is a GCF? 2. So when I divide by 2, I end up with n plus 8. Cross out the n plus 8. So that's like a 1 at the top. So your answer is 1/2. Okay. All right, let's look at 71. All right, so what can I factor out here? 4. So that's going to give me 10 minus a. Okay, let's do the bottom. So I have a and a, that gives me a squared. So what times what gives you negative 70? So one has to be a plus, one has to be a minus. That will equal to a negative 3. Negative 10, positive 7. Okay. And really, since, what I would do then is factor out like a negative here. So if we take out a negative 4, then I would end up with, just divide by a negative, that is, I'll end up with the same thing, which would be a positive a minus 10 at the top. So I'm just going to rewrite it because I just pulled out a negative, so it will look just like the bottom. Take out your a minus 10s. So now I have that negative that I pulled out at the top. And then the a plus 7 at the bottom. Okay. Any questions? Because that's all it is. I mean, like I said, if you know how to factor, this is pretty easy. Now, go down to where we are multiplying. It's going to be the exact same thing. Okay, just you have two sets of algebraic fractions that we call them. So let's take a look at this top, bottom. We don't need to factor that out. It's already in simplest form, but we can factor out the numerator and denominator on this side. So what times what gives you 27? That would equal to negative 27. That will equal to 6. So I know one has to be plus and one has to be minus. All right, so a positive 9 and a negative 3, because it has to be a positive 6. Okay, so let's do the bottom. What times what will give us negative 3? There's only one combination since 3 is prime. Okay, but we want to make sure it equals to a negative 2. Minus 3 plus 1. And then I already had this that I cannot simplify anymore. So now I'm ready to cross things out. Okay, so what can I cross out? The x plus 9s and the x minus 3s. Very good. And that's really all you do. So my final answer is x plus 7. That's what I have left at the top. And x plus 1 at the bottom. All right, just you can't. Okay? There's no checking. All right? All right, so let's take a look at this one here, number 77, and then I'll do a couple division. Okay, a plus 3 cannot be simplified anymore. A plus 2 cannot be simplified, so I'll just bring those down. I can factor out a 2 at the top, and that's going to give me a plus 3. Cannot factor out anything here. Okay, so I'll just bring down the a plus 2. Now I'm ready to see what I can cross out. A plus 2s, a plus 3s. My answer is 2. All right. So let's do a couple of these. These are dividing. So you see that you're dividing here. So just like when we divide with regular fractions, like if I gave you 2/3 divided by 1/5, okay, you would rewrite it as 2/3 times 5/1. You have to do the same thing. So you're going to have to take the reciprocal of this fraction. Okay, you're going to follow the same process as you do with common fractions. So if it's division, you multiply by the reciprocal. So really these division problems, they end up being exactly like the ones above it because you're going to change them to multiplication. All right, so let's take a look. What you need?
It doesn't matter which fraction you make into the simple.
Absolutely. It's always the second one, just like you do common fractions. So when we divide with common fractions, we always take the reciprocal of the second fraction, not the first one. Okay? All right, so we're going to leave this 3 at the top. We're going to factor out the bottom. So what times what gives us 8? That equals to negative 6. That'll be a negative 4 and a negative 2. So I'm going to say minus 4, minus 2. Okay, I'm going to take the reciprocal of this, so I'm going to flip that, change it to multiplication, put the b minus 2 at the top, the 1 at the bottom. Okay, just like when you are dividing with regular fractions. And now I can cross out the b minus 2s, and then I'm left with 3 at the top over b minus 4 at the bottom. Okay. All right, last one, and then I'll answer your question. Number 80. Oh, sorry about that. Okay, so in number 80, at the top, I can factor out an 8. So I'm going to be left with what? X plus what? 6, okay. I'm going to leave the x plus 2 here. All right, now I need to actually reverse this, so I'm going to put the x plus 2 at the top. Okay, don't forget to change it to multiplication. And then at the bottom, I'm going to factor out what I have up here. So this is x and 6 and 6. Okay. Now I'm ready to eliminate x plus 2's, x plus 6's. So at the top, I'm going to have 8. And at the bottom, I'll have the x plus 6. Say that again?
Like on the quiz, if